So I finished Eustia recently, even though I technically started it when the Fantail was leaked, but I paused for like 5 months. Anyways, I remember people talking that it was pretty good, and I'm pretty sure it had like the highest rating in the VNDB. And that's kind of funny considering that it's like the one August title I know that doesn't have an anime adaptation for it. Until I read it, honestly, it makes sense why there wasn't one during those years. I think it'd be well received, it's just more for the fans of like a darker setting that August wasn't really known for at the time. Like, if you ask people around my age, like, oh, what was the animes you watched from August? It's like, oh, it's like Fortune and the Moon Princess one. Fortune never got a TL for it, but I think there's a leak for the, I think it's Yoke? The one with the Moon Princess. The one guy I know that actually read it, he didn't like it. So. Anyways, this title has some Rio 7 shenanigans to it, and by that I mean it has a theme and they love repeating a phrase for it, but I'll get to that later. The setting is based on the floating land that you're set in the slums. The slums were basically created from this large earthquake called the Gran Forte, where pieces of land just fell off and it created like a divide between like the middle class and everything else, and it became the slums, right? And there's this whole thing where it's like, oh, the government didn't really help at all, so this like local gang was set up to handle it themselves. And on a side note, I'm not sure which language they were going for, but Gran Forte is fucking hilarious. Calling your natural disaster Big Strong sounds so dumb. But probably nice things like, oh, they meant like the Great Force or something. Which, you know, that's not what Forte means, it's Forza, but whatever. It's probably like one language I don't know. Anyways, your character's Kaim. He lives in the slums and works for the gang as an assassin or sometimes for intel. And that was to avoid being like a male prostitute. Basically, there's a lot of prostitutes going around in this title. You can technically buy their freedom, but there's like really stupidly expensive for some reason. And that's kind of a thing going throughout the VN here and there, but it's also not like a huge plot point. It's more like options type of thing. It's more that it indirectly brings out the other things going around. And while that's happening, you also learn that random people will start growing wings and they get pushed to this like healing center that no one is authorized to go in, and none of them can ever come out. Well, technically they can come out, just no one ever did yet. It's the most obvious plot point that I'm not even going to talk about because, like, dude, you know where this is going. So you basically get introduced to the first set of characters and it's done rather well. Sieg's the boss, pretty charismatic, has some pretty good chemistry with the people around them. Sieg and Kaim are probably the best characters in the title. There's a couple other ones, but I pretty much just perk up if Sieg shows up. Not to the extent of something like, oh, the rival in Days of Wrath, but it's good enough. Tangents aside, you meet a couple of the prostitutes, but they're not really imperative to the plot. They're funny and they have their own personality, but it's more of an example of the theme they're going for. Anyway, Sieg is expecting some new prostitutes to come by, but the delivery is late, so Kaim gets sent to check it out. You meet Eustia, and that's when the story starts. Eustia will just be called Tia for after this. That's what they do in the VN too. So Eustia for the title and Tia for the character. I'll handle the rest of the characters now because it's a pain to go through them when they're important. There's Eris. She was bought / like redeemed by Kaim. She's super clingy to Kaim's dismay, but she's also the doctor. Kaim just wants to live her own life and ignore him, but they're both fucking stubborn. She's basically the angered cat when like a new cat shows up. There's Fiona. She's the captain of the squad that takes the winged people into the healing center. She's even more stubborn than Kaim and Eris in the sense that not only the goal matters, but the path that to the result has to be done in this proper way, otherwise she gets mad. She's cute in her own way, and she's like a workaholic, but it's like, okay, it's another stubborn asshole, right? Irene comes in halfway through. She is the saintess and rolls to pray to the angel to keep the land floating. Her real name is Colette, and she's yet another stubborn one. She's blind and likes playing chess. Honestly, it feels like quarter of route is about playing chess, and there's a theme going for it, but I'll talk about that in the spoilers. Honestly, it's a recurring theme throughout the title too. And then there's Eustia. She's the princess, and guess what? She's also fucking stubborn, but also she hears you out more often than not. She kind of sees you like an ass, but trustworthy. It's almost like a bro or like a father figure. It's fine. Honestly, she's my favorite route, and there's a lot going for it, but I'll talk about that later in the spoilers as well. Eustia uses the lattice structure, but honestly pretty poorly. It's like G Senja, where after you know the full plot, the route doesn't really work that well. It's basically ignoring all the future events and wishing them out of existence. And it's not like G Senjo where you can bullshit your way out of it. Yusi's events weren't going to be stopped just because Kaim stopped. Some routes are kind of padded to make what's happening more realistic. They're basically trying to show like, oh, here's days flowing by, so the events will happen and makes more sense. Otherwise, like, all of Kaim's issues and all he's doing gets resolved in like 5 days when it feels like more like a couple, maybe a month or so. It's like a race for time and all that. It's like, hey, if you made everything seem fast, like, actually, that wasn't so bad. I get what they're doing, but it falls flat a couple of times during the common parts of the routes. Like, if you removed Eris as a route, her common section is probably reduced by half, and not much would have changed. Some routes are more seamless, where they combine the character and their issues well enough, but the one with Eris was really bare bones. I think Eustia was the one that was done the best with combining it, right? And it's mostly because they had to like space out all the days again, like I said before, to make the events work out. But you can technically speed it up for errors, and you can chalk it up to like, oh, the higher-ups are just being efficient and here it is, or they're trying to do everything like a little bit faster to make everything, to get their gratitude and shit like that. You can make excuses to work around it. I get what they're doing. It just felt like it was padding a little too long, it was meandering. So the main theme is about what's your purpose in life and what should you be doing, and then what do you want to do? Is it the right thing to do, and will you keep on going if it's not? Are you even aware that you have options, or are you just stuck in your hole? They go about this in like every chapter except maybe the first one, and honestly I probably just forgot about it. They keep going on about that it's forgivable if you don't do anything about the problem because you're unaware of it, but it's a sin if you're aware of it and yet you do nothing about it. Each route goes about this theme. Sometimes it's towards the girls, and sometimes it reflects back to Kaim. And for the most part, it works out pretty well. Sometimes there's some revelations, sometimes there's some bumping heads, but the plot keeps moving, so it's great. And there's this whole path Kaim goes through, and how the more he progresses, the more options are presented to him. And the more options that there are, the more he gets stunned by them, since he always had only like one option, and that was to survive. So it's a neat thing of him like going through all the slums, all the way to like high class structure. My favorite route was Eustia, and I thought she'd be the one that wore me the most. And that's kind of sad because I thought I liked Eris the most, and her route didn't really pan out all that well. Honestly, I felt like they didn't know what to do with her, so they put her in this like intermission where they covered more about the slums than the gangs. And it's one of those things where Sieg outshined the actual character. Technically, most of the routes are under the common, and then you have like 20 minutes of plot for the character you chose, or not the one you chose, but the one that's in there right now. So like Fiona is the first one, so you get her like 20 minutes. And then there's more in the appendix, but honestly maybe only 3 of them are actually worth your time. Honestly, there's like a couple that get unlocked after you finish the true route, and it's just to its like detriment. It's not something that was needed, and it just kills the mood. Sieg was my favorite character. A funny thing is Emiya's VA is here as a priest, but his role isn't all that important. Technically, you can say Kaim is more often than not the favorite character. He has his own personality and he's voiced rather well. Still funny that he goes mute during his H scenes, but that's just business. Also, the H scenes are pretty bland for the most part. The ones with the prostitutes were interesting in a way that was like, hey, these people don't get routes, but you can see what it was going for or how it would work. Basically in a way of like, hey, if Tia never showed up and then Kaim's stuck in the slums, like this would work out like this. And it's like, yeah, it's great, it's fine. Overall, I'm giving it an 8. I can understand the people that gave it a 9, but I can also understand the people that gave it like a 7 or a 6. Sometimes I give a separate rating for impact or enjoyment, but I think it's overall like a strong 8. It starts well, it dips soon after, but then gets back on track to the ending well enough. Could parts be better? Sure. I feel like Arisa's route went on for a little longer than it needed to be, and funny enough, I think the final route also meandered more than it needed to be as well. Technically, the older characters come back here and there, and honestly, they're more interesting that way than when they're actually in the route. You can even see it in a way of like, Eustia is done well even with the routes holding it back. You can understand why they're all stubborn. It goes back to the ideas of what's their purpose, but maybe you don't need it recurring every freaking route. So this will be the spoilers now. There's not much going on this time around, but the major thing I'll go over first is the routes. Honestly, I feel like the ladder structure is cool, but it never works out because people want a large impact for the finale, and that fucks up the consistency for the rest. So basically each route you take before Tia is a bad ending. You all die, guaranteed. Of course, they don't show you that, but they're all on a timer of when land will stop floating and you get fucked over by this black mist thing. Basically, Tia has to go through what she did on her route or it's all gone. And I forgot, but honestly, most of them don't even make much sense. Enough time has passed and I'm pretty sure both Arissa and Fiona would have been dead already. Eustia is the more questionable one, but Lucius would have been continuing on anyway, and I think nothing would be safe and would be fucked up anyway. You can technically think like, okay, so Tia doesn't have that strong of a connection to Kaim this time around, so she transforms early, but she'd probably just nuke everything depending if she keeps on listening to the previous angel anyway, so even then it would be like a bad ending. Most of the appendix scenes suck, but I really like the first Tia one where it's just Kaim's dream and he knows that it's impossible and that it's happening. And then they fucked up the mood with the last 2 Tia scenes that weren't needed. Just let me be in my downer mindset. Some of them are kind of iffy with the unlock requirements. The one with Colette and Claudia didn't have to be after you finish the title. It's just weird and it fucks up the mood again. It's like, what are you doing? There's a character called Gao. She was a cool concept but wasn't done the best. Basically, she was supposed to represent Kaim at the start, the person with no choice but just drowned in the one thing she knows how to do. You could say maybe it was like a TL or like editing issue, but I don't think they had enough time in what it was happening to even have it work. So even if the author came in and was like, hey, I'll do my own TL for it, I don't think it would work well. It just didn't have time for it. The chess thing they kept on doing during Colette's route is basically the same thing. It showed that she was too tunnel visioned and they didn't notice all the other options that she could be taking. It's just, hey, here's your options. what are you supposed to be doing? What's your purpose in life? Are you doing what you're supposed to be doing? It's like, oh my god, this again. So the whole title is like, okay, so here's Kaim not having any options except to survive, then taking care of Fiona because he admires her stubborn ass resolve. It's like, oh, that's great, okay, fine. And then there's Arissa and him bickering at each other because she has all these options at her disposal, but she already picked the option she wanted, but Kaim doesn't understand because it's like, no, I want to be with Kaim. It's like, what the fuck, why? That's the dumbest ass option you have. And it's like, no, dumbass, just pick the better one. It's like, no, I know what I want. And it's like, it's just like freaking bickering all the time. Then it's him realizing that he has his own options during Colette and Licia, to then faltering what he should be doing and tears her up because his emotions and his logics are like conflicting with each other. And it's like, this is done well, this is great. Maybe meandered a bit in Tia's one, but it's like, it's fine. And then I think I mentioned Licia's right where that's like the one I like the most. And it's because like, well, a lot of things are intermingling well enough. It's like all these new characters. It's basically what was happening in the first comment, I guess you want to say, where all these new characters coming, all these things are talking about. Okay, here's Licia, here's her dad almost dying. All right, cool. Here's the prime minister, whatever. It's like, oh, he's freaking trying to get the kingdom. He's trying to get the royalty shit. He wants to be the king. It's like, okay, let's see. Okay, Alicia, you're being kind of a little bitch. You're not doing what you're supposed to be doing. It's like, this is how it is, and this is how it's supposed to be done. And it's like, oh, I don't want to fucking listen to you. It's like, okay, let me put you back to the freaking slums and see how bad it is. And she's like, holy shit, this is awful. It's like, see, your prime minister guy is abusing the powers. He's not telling you everything. It's like, holy shit, I gotta do stuff. And it was great. A lot of this was interesting. Everything kept on moving. It was never like any kind of pause, like, oh, maybe let me think about this. Oh man, let me return back to this thing again. It's like, holy shit, Kaim, you said this 4 times by now. Why are you back here? And at least she was like, everything was going fine. It was paced super well. And that's basically it. So I'm giving it an 8. I understand people that want it to be a 9. Honestly, sometimes I feel like I want to put it to a 9 too, but then the appendix fucked it up. And like, honestly, I want to put it to a 7 now just to be a little asshole. It's like, why did you do this? So this is Future Edit. I actually already finished Labyrinth Meister. I liked it basically, and it's also not as long as I thought it would be. I thought it would be like 150 hours, and it was more like 90-ish or something. So that'll be the next one after this one. And right now I'm reading like Dairoku and Chaos Said No, which is something I bought like 2 years ago and never started it. And these would be like my Halloween type titles, I guess. There's a couple other ones I had, and it's like, maybe I should watch that, but both these together are going to take way more time. It's probably going to get past like November or something, so who knows.